Well, hey there everybody, welcome back. Thank you for joining me today. Happy solstice and happy summer. Without question, we should be done with snow here now, so that is good news to me. However, today I think, as I mentioned yesterday, we're going to wander around the property and discuss permaculture and kind of my perspective, my take on that, you know, just what it means to me, what I kind of intend to do with it in the years to come. So if you're interested, stick around and let's take us a wander. Now, I think there are a lot of varying opinions out there when it comes to an idea as broad as the concept of permaculture. And I think probably, like most things, people's opinions fall into two pretty basic categories. There's either the this is an exact science and must be done this way kind of train of thought, or the well, to me it means this, so I'm going to run with that. Those of you who watch my channel on a regular basis can guess which of those categories I fall into. For those of you who are new to my channel, the answer to that is I'm a person who just kind of takes an idea, runs with it, makes it my own. What we're looking at here, for the record, is one of our many compost piles. This one receives small twigs and large weeds, and has kind of been a nice little home for many garter snakes over the couple of years that we've been here, few years now I guess. And things like that, to me, are part of permaculture. It's working with nature to keep your crops happy and healthy. For example, the garter snakes around here eat lots of small bugs, eat lots of slugs, things like that would normally ravage my crops. So I do kind of encourage the snakes whenever possible. This pile here, as it slowly breaks down, has lots of interesting little caverns and tunnels. So they seem to really like this. Anyway, carrying on with the discussion of permaculture, you can see there's kind of a compost run, a grass clippings run. It goes all the way along the back. Got a bit of a break here, and then shoots to the back there, because that's all part of it too. It's about long-term building the soil, making it something that is able to produce good, healthy produce for years and years to come. And ultimately that's not going to happen with your quick fix like, you know, the Miracle Grow that I use for the hydroponic stuff outside or junk like that. That happens with patience and years of composting and building the soil. Which is exactly what we're doing here. We're slowly raising it up to an elevation we like and using the compost to do that. Defining the edges first. A couple of years from now this will have filled in as a bit of a bank. We'll put some soil on here, put some plants in there, probably long-term plants. I suspect a tree there, fruit bush, because that's part of the standard science of permaculture, isn't it? Planting those bushes and trees and long-term forever crops. I think it's the very idea of those long-term forever crops, the trees, the shrubs, the bushes, that scare a lot of people out of, well, getting involved, getting started, doing something on their own about permaculture. Because if you look at it, you know, from the it must be done this way perspective, it can be very scary, very financially scary. And, you know, well, I can't afford to spend $12,000 right now, so I guess I can't afford to do permaculture. I'll go back to buying my stuff at the superstore. Whatever, right? My take on that is, sure, it's expensive if you do it all at once, so don't. Do it a little bit at a time. Last year we managed to add this cherry tree. Earlier I thought I saw 2 cherries on it, but looking at it now, they may have fallen or been stolen, or just plain dried up and died, because the tree's not quite ready for that yet. But permaculture is a long-term investment in gardening, in my opinion. And if we can add even one of these trees or bushes a year, then we're working towards the goal. And what is that goal, really? Well, to me, with the place like we're at right now, it's building a nice garden that my kids will be able to come to in the long run. Maybe raise some grandkids in, we'll see. Starting to get that to that point in life. You know, with my long-term goals of bigger pieces of land, I want to clone off almost everything I'm planting here. I want to provide a good variety of things here for the kids, for the grandkids, and yeah, I want to just make sure that any acreage we buy eventually ends up completely covered in edibles. Why? Why not? If you're watching my channel, you're probably a gardener, and if you think about it, how many plants do you plant over the course of a single year? Over one season, some of us will plant, 20, 30, others will plant 100, 200, others go into 4 digits. So if you even take 1 or 2% of those numbers, make it a longer term plant, make that your investment. So 40, 50 bucks this year for a couple of shrubs and a couple of fruiting bushes. Nowhere near as scary. You get to watch them grow up, and you get to start enjoying those fruits of your labor within a couple of years. By then you've already planted a couple more trees and you're looking forward to them. It's actually a lot of fun if you do it slowly. A lot of people kind of assume, because I'm into the permaculture and survivalist and homesteading and all that stuff, that eventually every square foot of this property is going to be converted to useful, productive space, and I have to burst a few bubbles there. Not necessarily the case. Part of my long-term survival plan is having space to relax and just enjoy a moment. So that kind of means I'm going to be leaving a big chunk of lawn out of this whole thing. I mean, this half an acre here, so I can afford some lawn space. For those who are, renting a place right now and are kind of thinking about, oh, in the future I'd love to get started on permaculture, and using that as an excuse to not, well, get started. I give you the example of my honeyberry bush here. We bought this a few years before we bought land. I knew land was the goal, so I made this thing suffer, kept it alive in a bucket. Some might say tortured it, heck, even I would say tortured it. But when we finally found land, I had already acquired this honeyberry, that honeyberry, this beautiful red currant, these goji berries that I still think that one needs to be moved, right? This Saskatoon from our earlier clip, and this gooseberry, which honestly was a fruit I had never even heard of, but it was on sale, so I bought it. We were still living somewhere that was, renter-landlord situation, so none of these things went permanently into the ground. They all lived in buckets like you see behind the gooseberry here. This seems to have some lamb's quarter and catmint and a few other interesting things growing in it, so it looks like a collection of weeds, but it's actually kind of a test and experiment, seeing what'll pop up out of the soil, because we want to make use of what's on the land. Because to me, part of permaculture is not just the plants that you plant and the crops that you intentionally grow, but the ones that kind of come with the property that you get to be a steward of, and we'll talk about that in a second. Know your weeds from your edibles. And also, going into that, know that most of the things that you probably think of as weeds right now are in fact edibles and have been thought of as quite useful at one time or another. For example, I just learned the other day that apparently this is something called lamb's quarter and is edible, has a spinach type taste to it. This grows as a weed all over our property. So rather than having to plant something, we can just go out, look for these leaves, collect them, and we've basically got a nice little baked spinach leaf. And even nibbling on it raw, it's got a nice bearable flavor. This would be good in salad, this would be good steamed. So it's no longer pulled from the garden as a weed, so much as productively harvested, just not marked on the list. So back to the topic at hand. To me, permaculture is things like not necessarily just cutting down trees that are blocking the light for your garden, but taking all the branches and the logs, the debris, the sticks, and making something useful of them. It's like when you go hunting, you want to use all of the animal. So out here in the yard, we've taken down a tree. I want to put all of it to good use. I've got my campfire logs. I've got my, garden stake type twigs, possibly a fence. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with them there yet. I've got a whole bunch of branches that I'm clearly still working. A whole bunch more that I have already worked over. and a bunch of scrap twigs there. Now I was initially going to put them all in the bottom of my hugel mound, but that doesn't appear to be a good idea. So I think what I'm doing instead there, because I mean, let's face it, hugel culture, hugel mound, hugel swale, whatever you want to call this definitely falls into the permaculture category. I've got a lot of these longer branches that kind of line up on about the same curve. So I'm just stripping them down of all the side stuff, making a pile of them now as I go through all of these debris piles, and they're just going to lay pretty much naturally into that curve that I want. I'm not quite sure about the placement yet, so I haven't started ripping up any sod, but I am definitely making progress through these piles. And until then, it's another great place for the snakes to hang out. The birds love, you know, hopping around in here. Probably lots of bugs for them to chase, so kind of everybody wins. Yes, it looks like an eyesore, because technically we live in a town, well, village, I guess. But I think everybody in town knows I'm working on long-term projects and gives me a little bit of slack because, oh, he's that crazy YouTuber. But I'll find out for sure when the one or two folks who do watch these videos get back to me later on in person. But that does speak to the heart of what permaculture is to me. It's using what you've got to make the most that you can for the longest that you can possibly keep it around. It's repurposing 100 times before you recycle. Take this long shed, for example. This thing, it's a mess. It was kind of overbuilt, kind of underbuilt, kind of weirdly built. So a right-thinking person would probably just tear this down, burn it, and build a new shed to suit their needs. I, on the other hand, am going to repurpose it and continue to work towards my long-term goals, starting with what I've got. I've discussed before my intention to remove a lot of these siding slats because there's nothing behind that, there's just the 2x4 framing. There's a couple reasons I want to do that. This will get decent winter sun, so that will provide a little warmth inside the building, which, by the way, I am not going to insulate. Well, not right away anyway. And it will give me a late fall and early spring place to potentially play with a few plants, because it'll block, well, the only thing I'm really looking to block is wind and, well, snow from accumulating on top of what I'm trying to do. And that's what's going to happen in this half here. Right, because I want to be able to have a better garden sooner with better, bigger, better results. So I figure some sort of semi-natural seed starting area is a good idea. Now we've got this monster tree here that I have no intention of taking down because it hangs our clothesline. I'm sure eventually it's going to fall whether I want it to or not, because there are a few interesting semi-rotted places and some fascinating mushrooms that the squirrels munch on and then act kind of crazy. But anyway, it blocks a lot of sun from this area here. I'm going to leave that solid, and that's going to be the backing of the rabbit area. Now I know this isn't very well lit now, but once I take down some of the panels over there, we put some plastic up, this is going to be much, much brighter. But the sun will never shine directly onto the rabbits in their cages, and I think, you know, even going 3 or 4 studs into that will give me a lot of room. So they've got nice sizable hutches. I have issues with the idea of caged creatures, especially something like rabbits that love to roam. So I will probably make some sort of a rabbit tractor based on the whole chicken tractor thing so they can wander around and mow my lawn. You know, always making the most of what you got, right? Rabbits like to eat, they like to poop, they fertilize with their poop, which is part of why I'm keeping rabbits. Build up my lawn, build up my gardens with a nice natural long-term resource like rabbit waste. Making use of this space instead of kind of a dumping ground for broken bikes and future projects as a garden space, I think is a little bit more on the permaculture side of things too, because it's taking advantage of what I've got to build towards what I need to keep myself sustained. Fair warning to any tender-hearted viewers, do not get attached to young bunnies you may see on the channel in the future, because they too are part of the permaculture plan. I believe if you're gonna eat, you should be as responsible for your food chain as you possibly can. And, well, I eat meat, so That's why I've got the shooting shed and all the archery equipment, is so that I can take care of my own hunting needs. And that's why I'm going to be raising rabbits, because they can use the scraps from my yard to produce nutrient-rich waste to put into my gardens while filling my belly and providing me skins I can market. Yeah, so the broodstock, Dad and Mom, and probably Mom, you can get as attached to as you want. They will be allowed to grow to a nice ripe old age and left to die of semi-natural causes. However, yeah, like I say, don't get attached to their young, because their young are part of the permaculture plan. It is what it is. I suppose, considering, since I intend to keep this channel going for the years and years to come, well, depending on what YouTube does as a platform, we may move to a different platform, but I enjoy sharing with you. You seem to enjoy sharing back. So, yeah, that said, don't get attached to any cattle or anything you may see in the future either, because they are also, well, they're freezer fodder, they're food. That is what it is. So while we're on the permaculture topic, I thought I would give you guys an idea, when you're thinking in long-term return on investments, of just how much you can get for your $10, $15 at the end of season, waiting, you know, so you can plant those bushes. That Saskatoon berry you saw out back, we bought quite cheap at the end of the season, and it suffered in buckets for quite a while. But these Saskatoon berries were planted from slips down the street, apparently, give or take 10 years ago, and you can see just how productive these things really are. So if we wanted to be hardcore, we could throw nets around these, ensure, you know, the size of our harvest. But we enjoy fighting with the birds. It's a race, it's a game. We both win. Working within the boundaries of nature, like I said. Part of my perspective on permaculture. Well, I'm guessing it's a safe bet that this video has rambled on for a little on the longer side by now. Like I said, I don't have a counter on my feedback monitor here, so I don't really know until I edit it all. But hoping that a few of you are still around, I want to thank you for sticking around to this point. And I have absolutely no idea what we're going to be looking at tomorrow, but there's a good chance it's going to be that riding lawnmower, because someone in the community kindly donated a riding mower battery for me. So many thanks to you, Brian, if you're watching this. And yeah, I will see you guys tomorrow.